We did not have the internet. We did not have, nowadays you don't even have to guess what's on the menu in a restaurant. You can look it up. And so the nature of knowledge is changing. And what artificial intelligence and those sorts of technologies are doing in that space is something that we've got to prepare kids for. And it's beyond us. So if we don't offer them the opportunity and a voice in what they're doing, then how are we doing that?
Welcome to a new journey. I'm your host, Matt Griffith, and with me today is the principal of James Fallon High, Jen Parrett. Jen, hello.
How are you, Matt?
I'm really well. Thank you for joining me in studio. I'm hoping it'll be a fascinating journey, finding out about your life and all the twists and turns that have led you to become the principal since 2016.
Yeah, 2014 I relieved for 2 years. So, I've been there. This is my 11th year as principal.
Yeah.
But I've been at James Fallon since 2008.
How difficult is it to be a principal these days?
I think that that's a narrative that people think that the job is really hard. There are challenging elements to managing any sort of job with lots of different people, but it's a great job. No 2 days are ever the same. There's lots and lots of highlights, lots of things that you do. So yes. I'd like to think that, actually when I go travelling, people say, I sometimes say I'm a teacher, or because when I say I'm a principal, I will go, that's got to be so hard. Are you stressed all the time? And there are moments of stress, but that's only because you care. But I think it's a great job.
Back in my day, you'd avoid the principal as much as possible because there'd be a fear factor around a principal. You didn't want to get on the wrong side of a principal. Yep. You'd rather they didn't know who you were. Obviously, it's very different now, and we'll get into that. Yeah. Well, you'd be hoping it'd be a little bit different. Let's start from the beginning, because we always ask this question to kick things off. Your background and connection with the region. Are you born and bred here, Jen?
No. I was a bankie's daughter, so every 2 years we would move. So I was born in Sydney, but we moved. I had 7 schools growing up. We moved to Canowindra, Griffith, out to Balranald, back into Sydney, down to Barham, and I went to a netball carnival or netball trial when I was at Balranald Central School, and where the hay plain is really, really flat. And we drove to here, to JC King Park, and all of us in the back seat of my mum's Falcon went, isn't this beautiful? Such a lovely place. And then I was at Barham High School. I was doing lots of subjects by correspondence, and the bank knew I would be moving halfway through my year 12, and they didn't want that. So the bank actually paid for my boarding here at Scott's.
Oh, wow.
So I think we're the only year 12 class that doesn't have its photo in the library, because I think we were naughty. I don't know. I don't know. That's what we did. A bunch of country kids there, and the bank paid for me. And then Mum and Dad moved to Glen Innes, so that was 24 hours by train.
Wow.
So I didn't see them very often during my time here, but that's when I fell in love with Albury, and I love it. And when I was we were out in the Riverina in Leighton, we always came here for shops and surgeons and appointments, and when we came here, it was great. I felt like I'd come home. It was good.
Yeah. When did you think education would be for you? Was it as early as primary school, or was it in high school that you started to think, I really would like to be a part of education?
I was in year 9. We had this work experience that we were allowed to go to in the Sydney. It was part of the country area program, and they'd put me in with somebody, because I kind of thought one day I'd be a fashion designer, which was not really what I wanted to be. And then that didn't work out, and then I went into school for special needs, and I thought, no, this is it. So I've always wanted to be a teacher.
Yes.
Always, since I was about 14. And when I finally did my prac, I thought, thank goodness, I actually really like this, because I'd put my eggs in that basket pretty solidly. But I've never, ever wanted to be anything else but an educator.
Yeah. And isn't that wonderful when you find your passion early?
Yep. It doesn't feel like work.
It can be great when you have twists and turns that lead you somewhere, and you never thought for a second you'd do it. But I really had almost slightly jealous of people that know from an early age what your passion is, and as soon as you got into a classroom, you just thought, this is what I want to do.
That's it. That's exactly right. And it was such a relief because I thought I'd really put my whole future into that, and I've never looked back. I've always wanted to be a teacher, and I'm so happy to be that.
But of course, there's a big difference, isn't there, between my sister-in-law. She works with preschoolers, so about 4 years old or something like that. And obviously, there's a big difference in teaching a 4-year-old to teaching a 14-year-old and older high school students. How did you end up, in the high school environment?
I couldn't do a wet Thursday in a kindergarten class. I just couldn't do it.
Wet Thursday?
No. It
is
way.
Awful, isn't it? I've got a 1-year-old and the amount of things that come out of that boy's body.
That's about right.
What
That's
are you
it.
doing?
So I suppose I was really interested in English and history. I was a history teacher first and foremost, and I wanted to be interested in that curriculum specialty. And I never I did a degree program that was based on secondary education. So I love working with teenagers. They have a natural sense of justice. They are young people on the cusp of adulthood. They are great people, and but I couldn't do the other.
Yeah.
And I take my hat off to those people who do preschool and primary because they give them all those foundational skills, and I think that's fantastic. But I like the high school space.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably a little too sarcastic to be a primary school teacher.
And again, you didn't dip your toe in any. You knew from a relatively early age that you wanted to talk to older.
Absolutely.
Children.
I think my first prac was at Glebe High School, and then I did a little bit back here, and then I was at Dulwich Hill, where all the kids, they were all kids from Greek backgrounds. And they had never and it was great. It was a really, really good space, and I just knew that I was enjoying all the diversity of that in that space. And I remember taking a guinea pig to write poetry about, and they'd never had an animal. Like, they don't have pets. They didn't have pets. So that was really interesting. I don't actually even know where I found the guinea pig, to be fair, now I remember. But
what happened to the guinea pig
I
in
don't
the end?
know. It was patted a lot. I took it in a shoebox. I don't think you could do that now. I think there'd have to be a risk management plan about taking the animal to school. But that's what happened. And, so I did. I really enjoy working with teenagers. That's great.
An interesting segue. Let's use that as a segue point, the health and safety thing involving a guinea pig. Obviously, things have changed a lot, not only in society but also in education. Have we been going in the right direction? Because as an outsider, and I've only got the 1-year-old, so I haven't experienced any other children and their progression through school. But all you really hear about a lot in the media is that the outcomes aren't as good as they used to be. Like we've found other nations, like Asian countries, Japan are doing so well, but we're not doing as well, and et cetera, et cetera. Have we been going in the right direction? Okay,
so I suppose I would say that I have a theory on that. So back in, I think it was around 2004, France and the US went to the OECD, which is the business arm of the UN, and said, we want to belt our schools into shape. We want to use business model where competition works and you look at KPIs, and we want to do that. And the OECD said, listen, we're not into education. That's a human service. That's not a business. They said, well, we'll pull out of the OECD if you don't, right? So that started PISA. Right, and PISA is the international assessment that is done for 15-year-olds in English, maths and science. They had 13 countries start in the first iteration. Now, I think the flights are stopped in Korea for when PISA's on, so they don't have an interruption. People have taken this and the competition around that assessment, and we have that assessment nationally, and we pore over that data, and what used to be a diagnostic assessment has now become a piece where we use it to pit schools against each other.
Right.
And schools are human service.
Is that where sorry to interrupt you, but is that where NAPLAN fits in that model? We
used to have a different assessment, and it was an internal diagnostic assessment, and it used to be a basic skills test, and we used to look at that data internally in schools. Now that data is published, and so we have league tables of schools, and then you're teaching to tests. You're not teaching to the kid. And I am somebody who's very, very committed to having students and kids are more than numbers, right? So, if you don't do well in that test, does that mean you're any less of a person? You've got different skill sets and different attributes that aren't measurable by that test. But, there's a private company that run PISA, right? They're never going to make that test successful because then they'd be out of a job. So it's all about that. And I don't believe the business model in education is where we need to head. I think in terms of risk management, we probably have progressed a bit. I remember taking a bunch of kids to New Zealand, and we went blackwater rafting, which is putting a wetsuit on and tyres down a cave. That's not a good idea. That's not a very good risk management plan. But, in terms of funneling kids into this narrow measurement, that narrow metric, it's not where kids are at.
Yeah.
And when I started teaching, we programmed and went off on tangents with things that engaged kids. What do we do to excite kids? What do we do that makes them learn? And we worry about how to measure them at more than we ever did. And I don't think that's fair on kids. I really don't.
That makes sense. I mean, does that lead us neatly to the Academy for Entrepreneurial Learning and the Big Picture Australia design? Basically, you've got an academy, I understand, at James Fallon, and it is based around this big picture way of learning.
That's right. So we have a school within a school, which is personalised project-based learning. The assessment is exhibition, where the students discuss their learning before a panel, like a job interview, right? Like a research progress review if you were doing your doctorate. And the reason that we have it there is because I saw that our young people need different learning, like you need choices in learning. And I have 2 children, they're adult children now. One really fitted into school, right? So the other one fitted into certain aspects of school. Tremendous learner, she's managing a store in Chadstone, but she said to me so many times, "I'm not school smart, Mum. Do you know what that means?" And I said, "I know exactly what that means." So you got to be able to find a smart for a kid, and it doesn't have to be in something that's measurable by NAPLAN or PISA or the HSC. And the HSC is as old as I am. Right. And since digital technologies have taken over, we need to explore transformative pedagogies. There's actually, the OECD have developed what's called a learning compass for 2030. Like 2030 is only 5 years away. What are we doing to support kids that learn at different spaces and places? And so Big Picture was something that I found through a friend who moved to Newcastle, and Hunter Sports had it there, and they have a talented athlete program, so they use it for all manner of learners, right? So most of those kids have 30 hours of soccer training, and they fit their learning in around that passion. And those kids were getting into universities through the graduate portfolio program. Really, really high-performing kids that get really bored with sitting in a classroom and, spitting out work. So I did some research on it. I really did my homework on it. I was lucky. I got a Harvard fellowship to have a week in Harvard, and I visited some of the schools because it's based in the US. So I visited places. I made sure that it was right for my context, and then we started in 2019 with 2 advisories. And what I would say is that for me, it's something I'm really proud of, because not everybody wants to do that. people want to swim with the salmon in education, and so finding a way for other students to learn as a viable alternative to that is really important. So I have done I've done my doctorate. I've not finished my doctorate. I've got a chapter to go. It's a chapter that really sucks. So my supervisor's making me rewrite it, and I'm going to have to probably do a whole bunch of rewritten work. But I think big picture would work really well in country areas. We have to hunt for staffing for art teachers and physics teachers. And if we look at a kid in a context of where they are and the skills that they have and the interests that they have, I think that really works. I mean, as an adult, you do the things that are interesting to you. If you don't, it's miserable and you don't want to do that.
Yes.
But we tell kids to take a cup of cement and, learn about cells.
Yeah.
Right?
That's such a good way of, like I did, I have an English-oriented brain. I don't have a mathematical brain. And I've forgotten every single thing that I was forced to learn about maths in high school, and I scraped through. I got like A's in English, but like C- in maths, and it almost broke me. I remember at the time because I just loathed it so much. But is the big picture idea is that saying to someone like myself, for example, that you don't have to do that, and you can harness what your potential is based on what your characteristics are.
Yeah, so the student devises a learning plan. There are must-dos within the learning plan.
Probably
so
maths.
You've got quantitative reasoning is what it's called.
Okay.
So it's applied maths. So
yes.
Someone like my daughter, right, would sit on a maths test 8 times a year in her school, and 8 times a year she was told through that number that she was dumb at maths.
Yes.
Now she does KPIs and forecasts and budgets, and all that stuff is applied maths.
Yes. Yes.
But it's particular to her field. So
interesting.
Quantitative reasoning is applied to what they do. So they develop the learning plan. They have an appreciative inquiry question each term based on a project or an answer to a question, and they look at what research they're going to do around that, what they're going to find out about that. There are some whole advisory things that they do, but the teacher doesn't say you need to do this. They guide them, and the parents are part of that learning plan. So the kid owns their learning. Yeah. So if they're not doing their learning, it's on them.
I much prefer that. Can I come back to school?
Oh, you can come and have a
another
look.
Crack at it.
Yeah. You walk in and no one stands to attention. They're all busy. They're all deeply engaged.
Yeah.
And it's great. We've got 80 kids that learn that way now at James Fallon, and people are taking notice of this. So when we started in New South Wales, we were the 9th school, and now there's 30 schools that are exploring that in New South Wales, and it's a way forward for kids. And there's no marks. So there's no marks.
Oh, well,
I love that.
Better.
There's no marks.
That's
you
brilliant.
get feedback.
Yes.
So
and in 2021, you were voted the Regional Australian School of the Year. So that was after you brought in the big picture plan. The main thing that I get out of this, Jen, about yourself personally is the passion. I mean, it emanates from you when you talk about it. I mean, clearly it's something that, I mean, if you were part of the big picture program, people would say, well, you are passionate about being progressive in terms of education. So harness that and move into that area. So clearly it's something that you don't want to swim with the salmon when it comes to organising education either. You just don't want to be a part of the pack. You want to see what can be done better.
Well,
is that fair to say?
That's right. And I guess the other part of it is that young people are going to grow past me. So are we preparing them for life past my generation? I would say that when I went to school, there was a big pile of Encyclopedia Britannicas. And when I went to uni, there were two computers for 210 people. We had to handwrite assignments, and 2 computers was just fine. We did not have the internet. We did not have, nowadays you don't even have to guess what's on the menu in a restaurant. You can look it up. And so the nature of knowledge is changing. And what artificial intelligence and those sorts of technologies are doing in that space is something that we've got to prepare kids for. And it's beyond us. So if we don't offer them the opportunity and a voice in what they're doing, then how are we doing that?
But do you need teachers like yourself? You're clearly excited about that. Do you find that there are teachers who, you know, 'cause in some ways I'm an old curmudgeon and you know, I like things the way they are.
Yep.
I don't want to change. Do you find that with teachers as well? Are you an outlier, or are most teachers like you and very excited about the future?
Look, because our school community have supported this design, and I'm really proud of the teachers, because ultimately what we're saying is that this is a new way to learn, which actually says to teachers, well, the way that you've been teaching for years isn't the choice. Right, and that's not to say it isn't, because there is a way. The HSC is a way of learning, and it suits a lot of learners, and it's a great equity tool because it gives you a number that takes you away from, like, once upon a time university was about who your dad knew, right? That HSC is a number, and therefore that doesn't do that, but it's not for everyone. And so though the whole school community supports that, it wasn't easy. Because everyone thought, well, what is this? What is this new thing? And how do you assess people? Like, what do you do there? But it's now become part of the fabric. And what I would say is those teachers who are brave enough to advocate for the design, because they take enormous professional risks in doing this, they are really, really happy teachers. I have a head teacher in this space. His name is Tony, and he has been with me along the journey all this way through. And it's not been easy because you have to constantly justify the work. But there's a team of 5 advisors in there, and they are some of the happiest teachers that work because the kids are engaged. You're not fighting with them because they own the learning. They do what they do. The hardest part is to let kids learn because you're not in charge of all the knowledge, which is a different way of thinking. So I find that I speak to, like, I'm lucky, I've got a few big picture prints and a couple of other people that I work with, and I'm part of the big picture organisation, and I'm a board member, so I get to talk about this all the time, but the teachers don't. So having a team is really important, and every one of the advisors have a life or an interest, a deep interest of something that is outside school. So yeah. So they, like, one of them is an ultra marathon runner, and another one's a paddler and a cyclist, and they've come from all sorts of walks of life, and they're happy to let kids learn. Yeah, which I think is awesome.
Brilliant. You've injected this segue for me perfectly by mentioning that, actually, Jen. How about yourself? What are your passions outside? Because, I mean, obviously it would take a lot of work, and I know we talked about it at the start. I'm not sure if we're actually recording no, we were, when we said how hard it would be as a principal, but clearly it takes a lot of time. It would have to. But outside of work, what are your passions?
I love swimming. I love open water swimming. If when I retire, I will swim every day if I can. I love that. Yep. That's good fun. So some of us go down and to Victoria or the coast, and with lots of other people. So if something's going to pick you off, they have to. You're in a big shadow.
Did you see that video in New Zealand of the lady who was swimming, and the orca went right up to her, like 3 or 4 of them, and swam with her, and she didn't panic or anything. She was loving it.
Yeah, no, you don't wee in the water. That's apparently. So
you'd like to do. So
I love that.
Do you swim in the river, or?
I do until it gets too cold. Right, I'm not under 14 degrees. I'm not great with that. But I go to the outdoor pool twice, like at 5:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah,
and so. We swim there, and it's warm. It's beautiful. You do have to put a deck coat on the way, like take it straight off and then jump in, and then it burns on the way back out. But it's great fun. And it's great for your mind. So we do that. I walk, and you've got a community here in Albury. My parents have moved here, so I spend a bit of time with them. And so yeah, and I live on a farm. So
yeah.
when I'm home, it's great. My husband tells me I'm never home, but that's okay.
You've got the 2 kids. You got the hubby, but the kids have moved out now.
Yep.
You say one manages a store, and one is in education, I believe, which would make you feel proud, I would imagine.
Oh yeah. No, he's he's one of those people I think is born teacher. He just walked in and he did some SLSO work for a while, and he walked into the place, and my daughter was with him at the time, and she said, "Mum, they actually really like him here. He's like a rock star." And she was like incredulous. But he really did like the work. And he did have a fabulous English teacher that he really, really loved, and that inspired him. And that was Adrian French, and he loved him. So it was actually really cool to see Adrian at Albury High and say, this is what Lewis is doing, because that was really good. And Anna has found her smart. She's a really social learner. She's not one of these ones, and can apply learning. So it's great to see that they've got, they're good people, you know, which is nice. That's all you want for your kids. Yeah. You want them to be safe, happy, and be good people.
Was it hard to separate being a teacher from being a mum? You know, I mean, did you sometimes want to treat them like they were a kid at school?
Yep. So occasionally when they may have been in trouble, I would say, geez, is that the best you can do? And there was one time where one of my children, I'm not going to say which one, was put on the malpractice register for taking a photo of an ancient history paper, and ancient history is my thing. And I had the 3 members of the senior executive from the school on speakerphone to me, and I thought, thanks very much. And there was 20 minutes between myself and that child, and that was a good thing. That was a very good thing, because I would have probably preferred they'd been suspended for fighting instead of being placed on the malpractice register for a history exam.
Oh,
but anyway, that's okay. But kids are kids. Like,
yes,
you know,
it,
like
they
are their own people. When the minute you have kids, and you would know this, Matt, you can't control what they do, and nor should you actually. Yeah. But it's frustrating when every part of your life you've been able to manage, and then all of a sudden there's this little person that goes, "Yeah, I'm going to cry when I want to," and yeah. And
did it make you a better teacher in a way?
Yeah, you are, I think, because you actually see it from a perspective of a parent, and I think that's really important. Having said that, I thought it was really important for me, and other people do it differently. If in a smaller environment, they would have gone to the same school I was working at, and we actually moved to Albury deliberately because of that. We wanted to make sure that they were at a school I wasn't working at, and that was just our personal preference. And then, we were still invested. Like, my husband used to do all the soccer trips. He would be the person on the bus, and, he'd drive the bus, and he'd be part of that, and that was great. So we were able to invest time, but in a different way, and have a different relationship, because as a parent, you are the advocate for your child, who can be if you're not. I didn't want somebody to say, have a parent-teacher conversation in a corridor. I'd like them to be more prepared and organised. Yeah. And I wanted them to be their own people too. Yeah. Not just be the principal's daughter. So, yeah. Yep.
I know it's a kind of it's something you haven't got a black and white answer to, really. But when do you think the evolving brain, because, I mean, we're constantly learning things, obviously, but they say, like, your brain development ends roughly, say, as a man in the 20s or whatever it is. When is the brain at its most fascinating as it's evolving, do you think? Because obviously, like, there's that accelerated period at various points through childhood.
Yep.
What do you think?
Look, the time where you actually learn most is between the ages of 3 and 5. Yeah. Because you are acquiring language, and then language frames that learning. I guess the other part of that is when you've got different growth spurts, you learn it different ways. But the brain is amazing. Like, if you have a brain injury, or, something happens to your brain, you can actually get other parts of your brain to learn that space. But without language, without framing thought and knowledge, that's really hard. So if you are nurturing your young person at that age, then that sets them up for a long time. When we get young people and they haven't had some of that, then it's a lot harder to get them to where they need to be.
Yes.
in terms of their literacy and their, acquisition of knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, for example? Are you happy where you are, or do you have any desire to go elsewhere?
Well, they have a deferred salary scheme with the department, and in 2027 I take that 12 months off, and I can't work because I'm on this deferred. You pay 80% of your salary into this fund, and so then I can't work, and I think that'll be good for me to work that out. I don't think it's good for me to go back there if I've had 12 months off, because I'm a little bit bossy, and I go, why are you doing it this way? And that might not be great for the school. But I'd like to do something around, I'm really passionate about rural education. I see that if you've got kids in a socioeconomic quartile in the city and you have them in the same place in the bush, their outcomes are still really different, right? Kids in the bush need a more scrutinised equity lens, if you like, and I'd like to see if I could do something around influencing education.
Yes.
And that's what my doctorate's all about, thinking about big picture in the bush and thinking about how we learn in the bush. And I think that's really important. Australia is actually the fifth least equitable system in the world.
Really?
Right? Because we have higher concentrations of disadvantage in disadvantaged schools. And they've just done a study through UTS, and they've worked out that there's been a sharp increase in the amount of high concentration disadvantaged schools in Australia. That's not a nice statistic for Australia, and we've got to think about doing things differently. We can't keep going the same way.
Yes.
So I'd like to think maybe one day that I could do something around that.
Yeah. So more, rather than a specific school, more like the holistic thing about
looking at systems and looking at how that works. And I'd love to, I'm one of the, I've been in education now since 1989. I think that I've got a bit of wisdom to share, if I can, with some of our, other, like some of those teaching principals. They do amazing work in those little schools. They're teaching and doing all the leadership stuff at the same time. Yeah. They're amazing.
Can you do that, a job like that regionally, or would you have to go to
You would have to. No, I could do that flexibly. Most people can work where they are now. They don't have to be in a place. I would not move. I wouldn't move from here. We love it here.
Yeah.
And so we'll have the opportunity to do a little bit here and a little bit there. I wouldn't mind doing a little bit of locum principal work, actually. But I'm deeply invested at James Fallon, so it wouldn't be my school, so I could be a bit more observational about that.
Yes.
But yeah, I love the school. The school is a brilliant school, and people don't see us from the street because we're built next to the cemetery, and I make jokes about it being quiet on that side, but no one sees us. And so they make decisions on what they might hear or what they might have heard, and it's a brilliant place. Every type of kid in Albury goes to James Fallon, and I think that's worth celebrating.
Without getting, I mean, we could talk for a long time about this kind of thing, I'm sure, but just in a nutshell, do kids need to go to private schools to get a better education? I'm currently having this fight with my wife, even though my kid's only a year old, because I don't think you need to.
No, I went to 7 schools. I went to 1 independent school. I started my career in an independent school because I couldn't get a job out of Sydney at the time. There's a different, you're accountable to the taxpayer in a government school, right? So I think there's no higher accountability, and I think that's really important. Independent schools are about, I suppose, about siphoning off young people in a way. And I understand the fear around my kid's going to mix with that kid. Oh, no, that's going to be terrible. But they're only at school 202 days a year, less if they're in a private school, right? And the rest of the time they're with you. So you raise your young people. School helps, but if you're invested in wherever they are, I think that's really important. And we have fabulous schools in Albury, really amazing schools, because our schools reflect the demographic of Albury. And Albury is a tremendous place. It's a thriving community full of interesting possibilities. A lot of people from little towns come here to get opportunity. So why wouldn't you? And it's, it's a voluntary contribution, and it's underpinned by the government. That's what public education is. As somebody who has worked in both systems, I'm far more accountable for my, my professional behaviours with a system, with the government, with the taxpayer. So I would, I'm a strong advocate for public education, but based on my experiences, based on what I believe. And, we all went to public schools back in the day, and that was really interesting. I went to Sydney University, and I was at a university college, which now I think costs about $800 a week. It's the stupidest, and everybody would ask you what school you went to, and then they would judge you based on your level of connection.
Don't like that. It's not what Australia is about. That's what it's like over in England.
Agree. Yep.
But we should never be what... I've always felt proud of... I went to a school... it's shut down now. It was in Adelaide, Morphett Vale High School, and it was notorious as a terrible school. And Ray Martin once did a thing on it, on a current affair, because some ridiculous amount of students were suspended at any one point in time. It was a terrible school. But I'm so proud of the fact that I had a few years out, and then I got into university with the adult entry, which was a doddle. That's what I tell all of the kids. Don't worry if you don't do well with your exams, because just do adult entry. Anyway, got in, did that, got a degree, and I don't feel like I missed out at all, even though it was an awful school. I don't really know what my point is, but
sometimes schools go through cycles too.
Yeah.
So depending on the circumstances,
I don't feel like I needed
to
go to a private school. That was my point.
Yeah.
Because most people would have a much better time of it in a public school than I did, and I survived.
And if every one of us went to public schools, like in a place like Finland, every school is public, right? So you have all the diversity of every, I suppose, demographic attending. You don't siphon off different spaces. I mean, I absolutely appreciate the right of parents to choose.
Yeah.
And I understand that that's where that is. But your local public school is for the public, right? So, if we all went to public schools, it might be, I suppose there would be more equity in our system.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Well, it's been a fascinating discussion, probably focused more on your industry than you personally than I would have done maybe in a few of these past journeys. And that's mainly because, again, the passion that you have for it, it's intrinsically part of you. I mean, it's very clear that you are in the passion of your life. I mean, this is what it's about, and you're very lucky to have found that from a young
My husband
age.
reckons I'm really boring because I talk about work a lot. Yeah, that's it.
But look, before you go, I do want to ask you a few lighter questions that don't involve schooling. You love the border, very clearly. If you would recommend for people who are coming to the region for the first time, if you were going to point out a few things that you must do if you come to the border, what would you say to people?
Well, I love the river, and we live out of town, so we've got the best of both worlds. The view outside our lounge room is Tabletop Mountain, so that's beautiful. It's really lovely. The space is nice. Be out in the space is what I think is really important here, and it's a great place for services as well. So the weir is fabulous. My husband was in the water game. He worked for State Water, and then he's now a full-time farmer, which he always wanted to be. But how the river moves and how the river was started around here. I laugh when you go to South Australia because they call Berry the Upper Murray, and that's just rubbish because it's not the Upper Murray. Here is the Upper Murray.
Yes.
But then being out, the way that people, are out in the greenery around here is fabulous.
You clearly couldn't live in the city.
Oh, no. I'd rather poke my eyes out with a stick than live in a city. Yeah, no.
So when you hear, I assume that you visit the kids.
Yes.
When you have to go there, do you just have that little feeling of dread about having to battle with the traffic? And
I'm better at it than I was. I don't love going through the city. I just find the time. We live out of town and everyone goes, "Oh, you're so far out. It takes such a long way." And that's a suburb in Melbourne. Yes. Like there's so much dead time in travel. But then I go to Chadstone where Anna works and I go, "Oh my Lord, it's just so overwhelming. There's so many people. And they're all in one place and they're all buying Crocs." And it's like, oh no. I had to go to the beach. Like if I had to live somewhere there, I would have to go somewhere where there was space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, you're so right. Overwhelming. I always feel like it's not how humans are really meant to live. It just doesn't feel like it's a harmonious way of balancing out your brain and it's not for me.
No way.
That's for sure. Are you a sweet or savoury person, Jen?
My favourite food is burnt cheese.
Burnt cheese?
Yeah, nachos, pizza, like burnt cheese.
Wow.
Cauliflower and cheese sauce. Yep, no, savoury for sure.
Spent the whole journey talking about that.
Yep.
Missed opportunity. Lastly, if you could provide a recommendation. Now, this would be interesting. So it could be a book, it could be a TV show, it could be something on YouTube, it could be whatever you like. Give us a recommendation for something that would be great for our brains.
One of my favourite books is called The Bone People by Therese Holm. It is she's a New Zealand author. It's the story of three people and their relationships. It's a really lovely read.
Yeah. What was it again? The Bone
People.
The Bone People.
BONE.
Yeah.
Bone People.
Oh,
but then I love reading. I'm a bit of a nerd. I love reading books.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
so,
that is not a surprise. I'm not sitting here going, "Wow, that's surprising." No, and all the best people read. So get out there and read as much as you can. I should do one of those inspirational talks at the school.
I think that would be good.
Actually, I don't read. You know what? It's killed. I don't know if it's good or bad thing, but YouTube has started to dominate my life more than reading. But I feel like my brain is still taking a lot in because I watch a lot of, say, historical videos on YouTube. But at the same time, another part of me feels like my brain isn't working in the same way as it used to when I was reading a lot, for example. Like my concentration isn't anywhere near as... So all of that stuff you'd have to battle as a teacher now because kids have been influenced so much by tech.
What they call it is continual partial attention disorder.
That's what I've got.
Yeah.
Jen, thank you. We'll continue this when we finish the recording. Jen Parrett, thank you so much. Your journey has been really terrific and interesting. I haven't talked to somebody in depth about current education. It's been absolutely fascinating and learning a little bit more about your journey as well. Thank you so much,
No, that's my
Jen.
pleasure. Thank you. It was good fun.